All right, what's up, everybody? We are coming in hot because we have a good crew here to chat all about beer. And obviously, when you enter our intro, it says something about, lovers of hunting, shooting, public land, Second Amendment, and good food. And none of that really matters if you don't have good beer at the end of the day. So we are at Wisconsin Brewing Company here in Verona, Wisconsin, and just outside of Madison and not too far at all from our HQ in Barneveld, Wisconsin. And if you're watching on YouTube on these cameras, you see in the background, hopefully, there's some incredible-looking equipment, big, giant silver tanks, piping going every which way. And the crew across the table from me should probably introduce themselves here because we have Kirby, Mike, and Ryan. And, why don't we go, let's see, I can't even think of alphabetical order right now. So we'll start with Kirby. Maybe you can give yourself a quick intro and what you do here.
All right. No. Okay. My name's Kirby Nelson. I've been working in the brewing industry 40-some years. And my title here is Brewmaster. I am blessed with an incredible crew of folks that do a very good job of making me look good. We have we're a relatively young operation. I mean, for me, 6 years is young. And we're in interesting times in our brewing industry. So we've been fighting the good fight for 6 years, and are just making incredible progress. And quite frankly, I'm enjoying every minute of it. A lot of people my age are thinking about retirement. The best years of my career ahead of me. And I basically believe it's due to the dedication of the folks we have here, the fact that we're lucky enough to be in a state like Wisconsin that has such great brewing traditions, and a wonderful community in the Madison, Wisconsin area with Vortex gang as some of our homies.
That's right. Not too far down the road.
That's right.
And Mike, then you up?
Yeah, my name's Mike McGuire, and I'm the Director of Operations. Got involved in this brewery when it opened 6 years ago, a little before that because we were building it. But it's been an awesome experience. We've done a lot of neat things in a short period of time. So we're keeping moving. Now we got a canning line going in, and
that's right.
I have to mention about Mike. Mike had never worked in a brewery before. We've been friends for 25 years or so, but you only see Mike a couple times a year because he was all over the world in charge of sometimes billion-dollar wind farm projects.
Yeah.
And he has been everywhere. And
Mike, like a master welder, I think I heard.
He does it all. Any silly idea I come up with, the next day it's done better than I ever could have imagined it. This company is rare because we wanted to have product out. We had purchased our brew house in November of 2012, and November 1st, 2013, we were going to have beer in the street. Guess what? We did. That never happens. It was on time. Wow. And literally, Mike has the lion's share of the credit for that happening. He's incredible.
We all did it together.
That's a good way of looking at it.
Yep.
Good guy there. And then Ryan, we have over here. Introduce yourself, too.
Ryan Sprague. I work for Wisconsin Distributors, so we are the wholesaler for Wisconsin Brewing Company here in the Madison area, all the way, I think, to Watertown, Wisconsin, and then pretty much all the way to Prairie du Chien, north, south of there, Appleton, a lot.
So, right.
Those are probably, like, for the listeners not in Wisconsin, those towns you mentioned are probably the only towns they can actually pronounce in Wisconsin.
Yes, probably, yeah. Yeah. So we cover a huge territory, and Wisconsin Brewing has been with us longer than I've actually been at Wisconsin Distributors.
Yeah. See, understand, gang out there in podcast land, we are a three-tier industry. We have us as Wisconsin Brewing as producer, and then we have partners that are called wholesalers. Which is great. We deliver beer to these guys, and we get a check, and they go out there in the street and have the hard work of selling, delivering, and being a collection agency.
There you go.
And then we have the retailer, which when folks go out to buy a couple Sixers to have at the house, that's what the retailer is. So it's three-tier, and it works. A lot of, some people don't really understand, but selling direct is a lot of work.
Totally.
Right? And, let's face it. In these four walls, I've got the easiest job, and I'm serious because I have control over things. Like I said, we've got a great team here, and if we don't like this, we can tweak and tweeze and this and that, but those guys have to go out in the street and deal with all the challenges of individual accounts, personalities, et cetera, et cetera. It's a very fluid, dynamic, changing market right now. It's unbelievable how fast beers and breweries are coming and going. I mean, when I started working in the industry in the late 70s, there was 61 buildings in the country making beer, owned by 41 companies, and Wisconsin was a bright spot. We had 7 breweries. Okay, today, I would literally guess between 8 and 10,000.
That's what I was going to ask you guys about. How do you actually become you guys are, when I look at this, I think, like, pretty big brewery. Mm-hmm. And you did it about...
Actually, we're pretty small.
Really?
Yeah.
What is a big brewery then? Is that like
all
your
relative.
Millers or something like
Yeah,
that? Where
yeah.
it takes
It
up
is
like a
all
whole
relative.
city block or something.
But there's a brewery down the road that's 240,000 barrels a year.
Yeah,
Right.
New Glarus is
okay.
a great brewery, and I would argue New Glarus is the most successful craft brewery in the country because they've become very big. Their products are absolutely killer and diverse, and they did it all by staying in the state of Wisconsin.
Right.
Yeah, that's pretty
an
cool.
excellent strategy.
What speaking of size, like you hear like the term like microbrew, right? Like where I guess what size are you like a microbrew? And then I guess I've seen some microbrews that are quite a bit smaller than what you guys have going on here. And then of course you've got like like a Miller Coors that's like
And there's brew pubs
crazy
like
scale.
around here, Great Dane, Vintage, some of those.
Right.
And they're all typically a 15-barrel system.
Okay.
So 15-barrel systems and they're producing beer for their facility, for their establishment.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Please understand the majority of these thousands of breweries we now have, a lot of them could probably sit in that little kitchen area over there. A lot of them have used the term. For some reason, Americans always want to categorize. This is big, this is nano, and if size matters, well, whatever. But, most of the new ones are relatively small. Like Mike said, so a lot of the brew pubs around here are 15-barrel. In this day and age, that's darn good sized. A lot of these guys are putting out 1-barrel systems, and again, to explain, we measure beer in this country in barrels, and a barrel is 31 U.S. gallons or 330.67 of these.
Oh,
and so, you got Anheuser-Busch, which is at one time had 52% of the U.S. beer industry when beer was really on top of the world in the United States in the 90s, and they were doing 50 million barrels.
Oh,
Yeah. And I started in large breweries. When I started at Capitol Middleton, we had a 35-barrel brew house, which is very large by today's brewery standards. I walked in and I said, geez, we got toys. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you go to City right now, there's a 1,000-barrel brew house. A lot of people walk in here and just go, wow, that's 80 barrels. I mean, for a startup craft brewery, microbrewery, however you want to categorize this, we did start quite large. But, again, it's all relative. And the industry right now in this country, I want to touch when we have all these breweries, it is so challenging.
yeah.
We have created a generation of drinkers that has an attention span and length of I probably can't say it on a podcast, all right? And so you've got things like Untapped, where there's a growing group of people who are going to drink 2 ounces of beer and never want it again. Mm-hmm. I've had 8,000 beers. Yeah, my ass, you've had 8,000 beers. You had 2 ounces, decided you'd, grace the world with your opinion on it and moving on.
On Instagram.
So if you look, I mean, you go into a lot of large, places that have multiple tap lines or about 1,000 feet of beer cooler, and you almost are paralyzed by choice.
Yes.
Right.
And it's really
Some places almost make a point of it, like that is their shtick, is you can walk in and there's just umpteen bazillion choices.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the draft accounts are rotators these days, and they'll buy 6 barrels, which are the industry that had been based in draft beer in terms of half barrels, which is half of the full size barrel. We now have little 6 barrels, so you can get more lines in a certain footprint. And a lot of the rotating places, your beer can be the greatest beer on the planet, so to speak, and sell like that, or the worst swill ever put out. They don't care. They're going to sell one and move on to the next one. It's just because one of the most common things you hear in the industry is what's new, what's new, what's new, what's new.
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, for a brewer, that's fun. You know what I mean? But it also, as a business model, it's questionable. Because you
Interesting.
really can't satisfy that beast. It's like what's a new shiny object? It's like a narcotic,
Yeah.
Something new, something
Yeah.
new, something new.
And realistically, we can't do 80 barrels of a different beer every week because you may never sell it.
Yeah.
People might like it right away, but
And doesn't that make your operation in the back a total nightmare where do you have to I don't know what I'm talking about. Do you have to clean out a tank after you've done one type of beer
Absolutely.
and then, and then start a new one so you're not contaminating it with,
It's ironic. You're bringing up an interesting point that I want to touch on because, beer back in the days of Joe's Six-Pack was probably considered the least glamorous and most, inexpensive of all alcoholic beverages. Ironically, it's the most sensitive. Beer is a very fragile liquid, especially in the light lager type form. It's very, very susceptible to forces such as oxidation, microbiological infection, and whatever. One of the reasons beer became very popular in the Middle Ages, and the history of beer, you guys, by the way, we could go on for hours. It's absolutely fascinating.
the Middle Ages you're talking about now, what would that be?
Well, the oldest known recipe for foodstuff ever found is 7,000-year-old plus from ancient Babylon area, I believe, for beer.
Okay.
Basically, beer is considered, to get off on a tangent, the mother of civilization. originally humankind, we were very nomadic. We wandered around a lot. In an area today that's known as the Fertile Crescent, it's Eastern Mediterranean, we discovered wild barley. And we finally decided, to hell with us wandering around, and let's kill that and eat it, and let's pick that off the ground, see if we like it. Let's learn to cultivate this stuff and turn it into bread. And we did. And then, in what authorities would have to agree is the happiest accident ever, it is theorized that perhaps some of these little loaves of bread were in a clay pot or something, and some water was in it, and sat around for a few days, and some true genius, instead of going woo and dumping it out, picked it up, took a sip, boom, life got better.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Can you imagine being that guy? Oh, look at this old wet pot of old bread. Why
Dare
don't I
you to
take a
drink
sip?
it.
Yeah, well, that's probably how it happened. So, kids, when your friends tell you they dare you to drink something, maybe you should, because you might get
Exactly.
rich off a new invention.
No, kids.
Vortex
don't do that.
is not liable for anything that you drink or ingest. Anyway.
But then again, understand one of the reasons beer became popular, it's a very safe liquid to drink. There are no dangerous microorganisms that can live in the environment of beer.
Because of the alcohol
The
content?
pH.
The pH.
pH is too low, and pathogens that can harm you in the beer environment don't exist. And so, the reasons the pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock, our victuals, especially beer, hath been spent. And it was basically the guys, they were sipping on beer to quench their thirst as they came over here, and the guys in charge of the chips are going, whoa, 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 the chips, we're running low. See that rock, get out. And they were going, here they're in this pristine new world, but they didn't trust the water. So they had to negotiate leaving enough beer on hand till they could figure out I believe it was an acorn beer, some type of beer with what was available in the North American environment.
So they were essentially using beer as like a water purification system.
That's actually a good way to put it. It's a little bit different than that, but
It wasn't necessarily purifying the... Or wait.
Put it this way,
maybe
it wasn't
sanitizing?
purified because basically there are plenty of bacteria that can live in beer, can make it taste absolutely awful, but they can't harm you. Oh. And so if you see this environment out here, these guys, and they're, again, Eric and James and Kyle and the Cellar Gang are incredible. All those tanks out there, we are trying to achieve commercial sterility. Mm-hmm. We only have one microorganism, keyword micro, they're small, and that's a particular yeast we've chose to ferment this liquid. We don't make beer, by the way, in the brew house. We make a fermentable liquid called wort, and the microorganisms work on this wort. They thrive in it, and the byproduct of them having a party in it is beer. And we don't make beer. We grow yeast. Okay.
All right.
But it's very, again, we get these milder lagers, which I love. You have to have control. And it's dedication, and it really is doing the same boring thing time in and time out. A lot of people are getting a beer, oh, what a cool, wonderful thing. Yeah, the romance. Get in here and spend most of your time, dragging hoses and cleaning tanks and soaking fittings, and you realize that beer is a lot of work.
Yeah.
But the rewards are great.
All right. Now, in you guys, kind of speaking of, oxidation processes and all these things about beer and keeping it good and whatnot, and like you mentioned earlier, you alluded to it, it's a big day here for you guys because this canning line behind you is going to be opening up. And, a lot of people, we were just discussing this earlier as we were kind of walking around and looking at it. A lot of people think beer is best out of a bottle. But I've heard maybe that it's best out of a can, or maybe...
Or maybe it's best draft.
Or maybe it's best draft, yeah.
All right.
Oh, so many choices.
Yeah, well, it's an image thing. Yeah, because let's face it, the can is how the majority of beer has been drank since the 60s. All right,
Okay.
And beer in cans had its roots in Prohibition. During Prohibition, you couldn't take beer home to drink. Mm-hmm. You couldn't go out to the tavern, so you had to go. Have to sneak beer home to drink, and that's when we really got in the habit of taking beers home as opposed to going out to the saloon or tavern. And post Prohibition, who wants to carry around those big quart picnic bottles? A brewery called Kruger in '34 did the first beer can, and they became very popular in World War II because we had all these guys of prime beer drinking age over fighting for us overseas. We got to take care of these guys. Let's get them some beer. And the can is a more convenient and lighter package.
It doesn't shatter if it falls and breaks.
So post-World War II, a lot of folks got into the habit as they were overseas drinking beer out of cans, and when they came home, we're cool with that. But you always get, the cans in metal and they're cheap and blah, blah, blah. All right, let me tell you something. Cans are a wonderful package. It's not on the metal. They are very inert, very protective linings in cans to protect the liquid.
Okay.
Beer is very susceptible to a phenomenon called becoming skunky. There are compounds post-fermentation in beer that a certain wavelength of light will get into the liquid and cause a reaction. It'll flip off a certain molecule off a larger hop molecule, react with hydrogen sulfide. That's a natural byproduct of fermentation. And you got something that basically reminds you of when you punt a skunk in the woods, all right? And here's an interesting thing. You see why this is in brown? These are brown glass?
Right. Yeah.
Brown bottles protect beer. They don't allow that wavelength of light. They
What's
keep
the deal
it
with
out.
some of them are green sometimes too? Is that
And
kind
green
of doing
is,
the
let's
same
put
thing?
it this way, green will not. Green and clear, you'll be able to get skunk in a heartbeat.
Huh.
I once, many years ago, was given a tour, and one of the guys on tour said, my brother was just over at a big brewery, which will go unmentioned overseas, and asked, how come your beer is always skunky? And the tour guide haughtily replied, all good beer is skunky, sir. Yeah, right. It was due to the green glass. And this reaction, by the way, if you went and got our, let's say vacation lager and put it in a glass and stuck it in that sunny windowsill for about 2-3 minutes, you would notice it. It happens that quick.
Oh, minutes.
Right. So
That
literally,
quick?
yes. So so the can really protects that. Basically, one of the parameters we're really concerned with when we create beer, is a pickup of oxygen. It will cause oxidation in the beer, as it can make beer taste very stale, bready, cardboardy, what have you. Cans historically has been much easier to keep low dissolved oxygen because you're going to pick up some air during the packaging process. Granted, the technology has increased like you wouldn't believe since I started in the industry, where it's not as much as a problem as it is anymore because there's so many new pieces of equipment and techniques to eliminate oxygen from the environment the beer is being packaged in. But cans are very, very good at keeping low DOs in the can, provided you have an operator like Phil who's on top of it. And
Right.
also, if you want to talk about basically going green, cans make more sense because they're so much lighter.
Right.
Freight is based on weight. And we can probably ship 40% more cans in a truckload than we can glass and, use that much fuel per case, so to speak, because we can ship more cans at a time.
I feel like they're just way more portable as well. Like if you're going,
Yeah.
if you're traveling or doing something, they compress right afterwards. Like if you're trying to space for waste and things like that.
Right,
They
and
just seem like a more
They don't shatter.
practical system.
They have a lot going for them. And, when the craft industry first started, again, it was no cans. It was, again, all based on this Joe six-pack cheap beer image.
Right.
And
You feel a little bit fancier when you drink out of a bottle.
You do,
Right.
but like you said,
But it's it's because you've been psychologically told that it's better with these gorgeous labels and foil top and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I get it, but let's go back and visit Earth. In reality, the can's a better package.
Yeah.
I truly believe it. And plus, you wouldn't believe how noisy a bottle shop is, and glass breaking all over the floor, and having to stick a crown in it's a totally different thing.
yeah.
I'm very pleased. We're getting into cans.
Yeah.
well, and you go. I mean, even just from you go in the outdoors, and every now and again, it's nice to enjoy a cold one. But maybe you get to your favorite spot, and I've been there before, where there's a broken bottle. And like, well, I'm not going barefoot today,
you're not
or
gonna pick through the grass and get every single piece.
right.
Mike, this had to have been a huge operation to be implementing, right? What's this for director of operations? What's it been like putting in the canning process?
It's actually been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But it's been a little stressful from time to time.
Yeah.
No, we've had a lot of fun, and it's been a good crew of people working on it, and we had all the right people in the right places, and it's just been an awesome experience. So today is a big day. It just
For sure.
We're excited about getting it fired up. We've been working pretty hard for the last 2 months.
Well, Mike, I've stayed the hell out of his way. Mike is the kind of guy who will be in here between 3 and 4 in the morning and stay till 7 o'clock at night. And he's been doing it 7 days a week, and he's been doing it for months. But I am younger than Mike. I can't keep up with him. I don't try. Again, Mike comes in here, and he just knows how to get it done. And I love watching him work with folks like Noah because he's not demanding. He works with them. He does everything he can do to give the contractors and the folks in here what they need to get it
You
done.
might want to ask Noah that question.
Is he pretty good to work with, Noah?
No.
Does his job depend on it? He asked us. We'll maybe hash this out after the podcast. But
it does seem like a true team here, though, because there's so much going on here, so much work, but nobody wants to take the credit for it.
Right. How many cans are you going to be doing? Somebody was mentioning like cans per minute is a thing apparently.
Yeah, this particular canning line will do 15,000 cans an hour at full speed.
An hour at full speed?
15,000.
Yeah,
okay, so Mark,
250 cans a minute.
Your question, Mark.
Well,
who's on the end catching all those cans?
Right. Where are they going after they're made,
Essentially, and eventually here next week, our packing system is showing up.
Okay.
And that'll go in, and then what'll happen, the cans will come off the line, they'll come through the pack conveyor, and then they'll all be put in packages and loaded on pallets.
You like robots.
So there's not some dude at the end that's completely overwhelmed and eventually just covered in cans.
Well, they may be overwhelmed at first, but they'll get used to it. Everybody will get used to it. Today we're going to run about 8,000 cans for the first
Oh, that's okay.
Child's play.
You guys, you haven't seen anything cool. And granted, I'm not a beer geek. I'm a brewery geek. I love everything in the industry. And when you see a can or bottle filler spinning along at 1,000 to 1,200 units per minute, it's incredible.
Oh,
it really it's amazing technology, and I can just sit for hours and watch it. It's just fascinating. And again, they've had to figure out this technology. Okay, we've got to basically there's air in that bottle. We've got to get that air out. And we've got to, get it filled. In a lot of places, we can pasteurize or not. And what pasteurization does is it goes through a big energy-sucking tunnel that sprays hot water over it. You get it up to a certain temperature that kills the microbes present, and then cool it down, and it stays stable. It won't spoil. But we also, this filler is very, meant to fill very cleanly. We also will bypass that with certain beers that we don't want to heat up.
Yeah.
So with that, these microbes and things like that, we're talking about like it essentially being very stable earlier, and those things can definitely affect the flavor. Mm-hmm. But if something got in there, like it wouldn't necessarily hurt you at the same time. It would just affect the flavor of the beer.
No, and it's a matter of degree. You've got to get to a certain level before they get to the size, or they're being fruitful and multiplying, and the flavors that they throw off can make it very tart or nasty or buttery or rancid and what have you. I was brought up, with I learned my craft from guys who spent their careers as East Coast brewers, shutting breweries down. I was working in a small brewery in Central Florida that Heilemann owned, and it was a different time. And these guys were great, but they'd shut down Rheingold, shut down Ortlieb, shut down Schaefer, and on and on and on. It was sad, but I gained so much respect for these types of guys, and learning about how to make beer for them. And these were mild American standard lagers. Which Bud Miller are a great representative. Hell, most of the beer in the world drank today is variations of this type of beer.
Okay.
And, I learned a lot from those guys and a real appreciation for it. And a real appreciation for how you've got to learn to handle this product to keep it good and so it's representative. And I get into craft, and we were just dealing with this one yeast and keep everything super clean. You get on some of the beers in craft, so we've got a tank right now that we filled with what would be a wild yeast, never wanted in large brewery beers, called Brettanomyces, which can give it like horse sweat blanket type flavors. We Funk Factory in town.
It tastes like a horse sweat blanket.
Yeah, and I like it.
Okay.
I don't know. How do you?
What I'm wondering more is when was the last time you tasted a horse sweat blanket?
Well,
he
I'll
has
show you
a bunch
video.
of them at home. His wife picks them up.
Just the blankets
when
or the
she goes
horses
out west,
too?
she gets them.
Oh, okay.
I think we've got an entirely different podcast on our hands here.
Oh my God! But then we do a beer for a place in town called Funk Factory, which makes spontaneously fermented variations of spontaneously fermented Belgian wheat ales, which means we do a really complex brew that we have an automated brew house, but this is a total hand job. And Mike's got to take some pipes apart and rearrange hoses for me. And I just geek out for 13 hours trying to make this stuff. But at the end, instead of putting it in a pristine, clean tank and one little cell of yeast, we pump it outside into a 1,000-gallon stainless steel pan. And you can only make these things in the colder months because in the warmer months, there are too many microbes present that will make for unpleasant tasting beer. Mm-hmm. And it just sits out there overnight and steams away, and whatever's present falls in it. And you stick it in wood and forget about it for a year. You're not controlling anything. And these beers...
It's called a cool ship.
Yeah. And these beers can just be marvelous.
So it doesn't have bugs, anything.
It can. And some can are terrible. Dan Carey makes some great... has his initial brewery, it's basically all for making what's called sour beers. You've probably heard that term.
Oh, yeah.
And that's
sure.
what these are.
Yeah.
And as I was starting to, get interested in these, I remember asking Dan, because I'm a control freak when you're making lagers and a lot of our ales here.
Right.
I said, how do you control this stuff? And he looks at me and he starts laughing. He goes, you don't.
You
Is it
can't.
just completely unpredictable? Like
Right,
until
and
you
what it
taste
is,
it, you
it's
have no
true.
idea.
It's spontaneous.
It's true traditional brewing. Understand, that's how all beer, we didn't know what yeast was till the 1800s. You know?
Well.
The German purity law, which basically was the first food protection law in Germany, I mean, it says beer can only be made with water, malted barley, and hops.
Yeah.
And now they added yeast because when they did it, they didn't know what yeast was. They just knew it was this gunk that appeared in the beer. And literally, all beer prior to the 1800s was ales. The main difference between under the heading of beer, we make ales and lagers, and the main differentiation is the type of yeast used.
Okay.
And to simplify it, ales are fermented at warmer temperatures, and again, we're making this nutrient sugar brew for the yeast in the brew house.
Is that the stuff you call wort?
Wort, correct. And the yeast gets in there and starts doing what yeast has and starts chewing up all the sugars, and it eats up the oxygen real quick. So it becomes what's called anaerobic, lack of oxygen environment. And so when the yeast is eating these sugars, the main byproducts are heat, carbon dioxide, and everyone's good friend, ethyl alcohol. All right? That's where the alcohol comes from. Ale yeast do this at warmer temperatures and during fermentation float to the top. All brewing was home brewing until the Industrial Revolution, all right? And basically, you'd have this fermenting slop, and it was basically women did most of the brewing. And they didn't know what the yeast was, but they realized, just like sourdough bread, we got a starter here. If you take a little of this and whap it in the next batch, things happen quicker. And so that's how they started learning to pitch yeast. An entire podcast could be could be devoted to a number of things that I like to babble about, but the rise of lager yeast is something entirely cool. It's almost like science fiction how it happened. And ironically, the UW, Dr. Chris Heitinger and some of his colleagues discovered the mother of what became lager yeast in Patagonia within the last 10 years. And it's a fascinating story. And
they think that is the...
It's been genetically... You guys, this yeast was just discovered, but now they found it, and it's pretty common in the southern hemisphere. North hemisphere,
Very dog friendly here.
Again, yes. Please understand, like I said earlier, all beer was spontaneously fermented.
Yeah.
You take a brew house, all right? Back then, you'd have a lot of wood, steam, a lot of malt dust, heat, perfect environment for microorganisms such as yeast to thrive in. And the beer would be put in these, spontaneously fermented. What was present in the air would fall in. Somehow, and this is a true story, an explorer got some of this yeast from this Eubanus, it's called, on his clothing in a beech forest somewhere in the southern hemisphere. Listen now, I'm not making this up.
Okay.
Came back and was hanging out with a brewer friend at some brewery. Some of this yeast escaped off of his clothes. It got into the environment and mutated, hybridized with some of the yeast that was normally in the brewery. Now, the next weird thing that happened was in the 1400s, the mayor of Munich got all the brewers together and said, I'm tired of you guys making lousy beer. You're going to stop. I want you all to take a pledge and make good beer, because beer is very erratic. Well, what they learned was when they made beer in the winter months, it was fine when they produced a wort. In the summer months, it wasn't. And again, it gets back to like what I was talking about, that lambic. During the warmer months, there were too many microfauna that got in the wort and produced unpleasant flavors. Mm-hmm. So in Germany, it became illegal to brew from a St. Something's Day in late April to another Saint's Day in late September. So were they going to stop drinking beer in the summer if they're good Germans? That ain't happening.
No.
So what would they do? In March, come to mid-April, they'd brew heavy-duty batches of beer and put them in wooden casks and get them up in the Alps in caves that they packed with ice. And this beer would slowly ferment, and they would draw these casks out of these caves during the summer to have a couple, 2, 3. And the origins of the beer garden were when some of the guys who owned these caves planted chestnut trees out by them, and the trees got big enough, they put tables and chairs to serve the beers underneath them. That's where beer gardens came from. Anyways, lo and behold, this mutated yeast, ale yeast likes warmer temperatures. We ferment our lagers about 20, 25 degrees colder. This new mutant yeast liked the colder temperatures. It was this, so they'd wheel this fermenting beer into these caves that were packed with ice. It was colder. Guess what it did? It was a more favorable environment for this new hybrid. They took over the ale yeast, and they started making this cleaner, more pleasant-tasting beer. And what's the stuff on the bottom of the cask? Because lager yeast settles to the bottom.
Huh.
So that's all. I mean, that's why the history of everything on this planet's fascinating, but for me, it's beer. And stories like that where you learn how things came from. And this literally, lagers just appeared in the 1830s. And now almost all the beer in the world drank is, the lager style beer.
Ryan, this is all stuff you use in your sales pitches, right?
Everything.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm
Yeah,
sure
we
when a
usually go through. I usually every day do that story 3 or 4 times. So
when a retailer is trying to just figure out what sells best, you go, well, let me tell you about
Yeah.
the history of the
and
Swiss
how it
Alps
works
and beer
is-
gardens.
How it
Yeah.
works
for
is after
sure.
10
Let's back
minutes,
up
they
a
just say,
second.
fine, just get it and get out of here. Works like a charm.
And then their next question is, what's new?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Perfect. Holy smokes! And is that why Oktoberfest is a thing in Germany? Is that because it got cold again? and
Beautiful,
then-
beautiful.
Another good
I
story.
love these stories.
I would actually,
These
did you?
stories are
It's
great.
almost like we'd rehearse this.
It almost is, but I
Because
promise we didn't.
When we do Oktoberfest, the style is called Märzen. All right?
Okay.
March.
Yeah, and that means March in German. This was beer that was brewed in March and stuck into the caves.
Oh, okay.
Oh, and then
Now,
it was-
and so it became the Märzen beer. And literally, that was a beer they drank, and whatever was left come late September, they could start brewing again. So they had all this beer available for a big party, and that is one of the origins of Oktoberfest. So the origins of Oktoberfest that's another cool story, and beer wasn't even part of the first ones. That was
really?
blasphemous, yeah. But that's again for another podcast. But
Jim's just a big lederhosen guy.
but literally,
Nice.
and the Oktoberfest style as we make it today, though, evolved in the mid-1800s as a lager, and it was from a brewery called Spaten. And Spaten in German means spade, means shovel. So if anyone who's listening, next time you're at a store that sells a lot of good beers, look for a bottle of Spaten, and you'll see the shovel head. And next to the shovel head, you'll see the initials G and S.
Okay.
And that's Gabriel Settelmeyer. And Gabriel was the father of modern-day brewing. He was the brewer at Spaten in Munich in the mid-1800s. And he, among the many things he did, one of the things he did was develop what has become the official Oktoberfest style. And it, quite frankly, is one of the most popular and beloved styles on the planet done right. I absolutely adore it.
Okay.
Ours is called Patron Saint because that means guardian of the order. With all these new funky beers, you always know you got something like Oktoberfest to represent what beer should truly be. And that's a great example of the style.
Oh, okay. So Oktoberfest is it's almost like one of the most ideal forms of beer or something.
Yeah, but the biggest irony is Mike will attest to when you go to the beer gardens, the big beer tents during Oktoberfest in Munich, which just ended a couple weeks ago. You don't get real Oktoberfest beer. You get their fest beer. Hell, it's golden colored.
that's
I've been
weird.
to Germany once. I drank 107 beers in 1 week, took notes on all of them, and got to write the trip off.
I'd like
you
to,
took
I'd like
notes.
to see those notes.
I did develop a beer from that trip, so it was legit.
Okay. It's good to
The
know that you
notes
took
got a
notes so
little
you could
dim
remember.
after a while.
Oh, yeah, and they're all stained.
Scribble.
But anyways, I could not believe it because when we got there, I go, we're going to the Spaten tent because that's the original Oktoberfest, and we're going to see, this is like, 9:30, 10 in the morning. I couldn't believe it when golden colored beers came out. I mean, it really was a what kind of moment.
Yeah.
But the beer is still very good, and in a half hour, you're on your second liter with a Schweinhaxen in the size of a beach ball in your hand.
Second leader.
And 3 in the
Just
afternoon.
Well, that's what I'm. So when you're talking about this, 100 and some beers, were these liters?
What, you think I'm going to drink shots? I'm
Come on,
professional,
Mark.
mister.
Yeah, this is a brew master.
I'm sorry. Now I've
Again,
insulted
another
you.
professional.
I'm
Right,
embarrassed.
right.
He's a professional.
Right. Mike, you were talking about you've been over to Germany and you're going to be going over again because you go.
I go to Germany a couple of times a year at least.
And you go, it sounded like to hunt, but then also for beer related?
Well, actually go to Berchtesgaden. That's where we hang out a lot.
Okay.
We'll fly into Munich, and then we take a train down to Berchtesgaden, or you can get on the S8 train and take it as far as it goes and go to Ondeck Monastery Brewery, which is one of the most phenomenal breweries in the world.
Everyone go to Index and
Oh,
drink
my
the Bock,
God.
double Bock.
They make a Doppelbock, and my limit is 3 Masses, which is big.
He's a lightweight.
They're unbelievable.
And Doppelbock, that's German for,
Another story.
what does that even mean?
All right.
No,
Real quick, I want to touch upon Mike over there has gotten to be friends with a brewmaster, Klaus, of the Hofbrauhaus Berchtesgaden. And this guy is awesome. And the help he gives us. Mike went over to do the factory acceptance test on the filler here at Krohn's. Klaus, on his own dime, took off from work and came and visited Mike in Munich and helped him with this. Being a German and understanding how, being the translator. I mean, that's the class of people.
Germany is like the center of beer, it almost seems like.
It's
became
it's very
so
good.
important.
It's one of the original beer established places in the world.
Well, like you say,
for
you can
very
almost go
good-
back to like Mesopotamia in a way or something, but then it seems like
It just
Germany
well, basically,
just has, like,
you know,
just-
A super rich
Southern
tradition.
Europe where it stayed warmer, the grape. Northern Europe, barley. You know what I mean? And
Okay.
beer. And now the question about double Bock, I don't know how much time you've got here.
How
but
much time you got,
Ryan,
buddy?
what are we at?
It doesn't matter
We're
when the
good.
stories
Yeah.
are so good. But double Bock, if you go to, like Mike mentioned Ondex, which is literally one of the coolest places on the planet, there's this beautiful monastery on a hill with a rock and beer garden attached to it, but it's a cloister monastery, which means that the folks that have decided to devote their life, you know, to religion, Catholic in this case, I believe, they enter these four walls, and the cloister means they don't leave them.
Mm-hmm.
They stay there the rest of their lives. But besides meditation, et cetera, what they do, some of them also make cheeses, and some of them are brewers. And there was the monks of the Brauerei St. Paulans outside of Munich, being, you know, good Catholics, during Lent, they do not eat, 3-week
Yeah.
period, but they could drink. So what they decided to do was make liquid bread. And so they made this strong lager beer. And when you get up to a certain gravity, again, we won't get into that, but it goes from Bock then to Doppelbock. Not twice as strong, but a beer that's going to have the potential to have at least 7.5 ABV.
Okay.
And when most lagers that back then are 4 to 5, you know, it's stronger. Mm-hmm. And they would live on this.
So they just sleep through Lent. That was the idea, right?
Well, basically, you talk about having visions. You're drinking 8% beer for nothing else for 3 weeks.
With
Yeah.
no food.
Right. So that became the double Bock. And actually, ironically, they got in trouble with the powers that be in town because apparently in this brewery, there was a window where they could serve beer to people on the street. And they started serving people as double Bock, didn't know what it was, and they were getting all out of control. But
The whole town.
but this they gave this beer a wonderful name, Salvator, which means savior. And the assignment to anyone watching this today is go out and find Salvator. You can get it. It's the original Doppelbock.
Oh, you
It's dark.
can get it?
Yeah, and it's wonderful.
Oh, wow.
And what else is interesting, you see that last name, that Salvator, ATOR ending, it became very popular in Munich. And, of course, when something becomes popular, everyone else is going to try to make their version of it.
Right.
So all German, a lot of Munich area breweries started making this Doppelbock, but to let folks know that what they're up against, it has an ATOR ending. So like Salvator, Optimator. Those you see that ATOR ending in a German beer, you know you got some serious business ahead.
You're going to take it to the next level.
Correct.
Whew, I like that.
And they're
Man.
wonderful.
Okay, I feel like at this point too, we've gotten to the place where I've probably should have asked this a while ago, but there seems to be so many different flavors and kinds of beer, but when I think of the basic ingredients, there doesn't seem to be that many. But a lot of the things you've mentioned almost seems to be like the way that you make it can change what kind of beer it is, the types of yeast that you use. It reminds me of optics too, because some people just think of when they look at a rifle scope or a binocular, they're like, oh, it's got glass in it. You know, it's got like, this one has good glass, this one has better glass, and this one has like the best glass. But it's like, well, actually each lens has its own chemical makeup, and it has its own coating, and it has its own way it's ground and everything like that. So I can almost see a parallel to then beer where if somebody probably just says yeast, you would say to them, well, what kind?
Exactly. I could call the computer right now and go to one of the yeast houses, and there are dozens and dozens and dozens of strains of yeast. I mean, basically you've got ale yeast and lager yeast, but under this heading there are so many substrains and this and that, and raw materials. I mean, beer making's been around forever, and what became popular was the use of malted barley. In fact, the reason of the Rheinheitsgebot is the Germans wanted to make sure there was some wheat left for bread. So all the wheat wouldn't be going into beer. But what craft brewing does today is, if it exists and it might be soluble, it has ended up in a beer. Now, I don't necessarily think squid ink is a good ingredient in a beer, okay?
Okay.
And
But
a lot
has
of
it
people
been
are
done?
Yes.
Oh,
You wouldn't believe what's been done. And a lot of it, I think, is done. I mean, a lot of people, it's all about innovation. And I agree.
Right.
That's how things move forward in any endeavor. But a lot of the stuff I see today, it's, there's a great saying by the philosopher Frank Zappa, without deviation from the norm, progress is impossible. Yeah. And there's innovation, but in so much beer today, you guys, it's not innovation, it's
Cans
desperation.
coming in hot.
Hands coming in?
Cans.
Look at that. Oh, man.
Sorry, I got distracted.
So
Without deviation, there is no innovation.
Without
I think.
deviation from the norm, progress doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree. But in beer this today and age, I don't see, what I see is desperation.
Yeah.
I see
Just kind
so
of take
much
a regular
stuff.
beer, throw something weird in.
Yeah,
and
and
then
it
call
gets more about tasting than drinking.
Right.
Our definition of beer here is a great beer is an adjunct to the enjoyment of life. I mean, life's a wonderful thing, all right? Look, we're out here, we're watching the geese hit the pond. We're all excited about a new piece of equipment going. We're having a great time in this podcast. You guys are pretty decent. Mike's a little repulsive, but we deal with him. But like when you're hanging out with your friends or at the backyard watching TV, I love having a beer. But I don't want to sit there and analyze it. I just want to take in the whole situation or the conversation I'm having with my friends. Beer should be an adjunct to the enjoyment of life. It should just be one of those things that for a lot of people just makes that special moment a little more special, a little more comforting, relaxing.
And everybody has a different palate. And there's so many
Yeah.
varieties of beers now
Yeah.
that palate has expanded tremendously.
Well, and like, when you guys are developing a beer, that was one thing I was wondering too, because, when we develop an optic, you make the optic good, and everybody can see that it's good. But when you make a beer, somebody over yonder who likes, dark coffee stouts, whatever, versus somebody over here who likes sour beers, and then you make a beer and it's like, well, tell us if it's a good beer. One person might say no, but it actually might be a good beer to all the people who like that kind of beer. How do you figure that out? Like, if you've made a good beer
Basically, yeah, that's I guess it depends what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
You're right. There is no right or wrong answer to that. So, there are classic styles, and when I'm a stickler, and all of us here are, and most of us really love traditional styles. And when a style evolved, like let's say a Pilsner, it's got to should be in this color range, and this amount of hop bitter, and this ABV and malty, and it shouldn't be dark, and blah, blah, blah. We're going to try to do our version of that beer, but it's got to fit these certain parameters. It's not true to style. But there are other things where it doesn't matter. You can do whatever you want, and one isn't more legitimate than the other.
Right.
And again, your point is very well taken. It depends what people like. Now, then you got these morons like Haze Bros, which, all of a sudden you want these really cloudy beers. And we're good, a good friend of ours who makes great beers and very, very good hazy beers will have customers come into his place, and instead of drinking the beer and enjoying it, if they put their fingers behind the glass and see it, they're complaining.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's not cloudy enough.
You don't want to see
I
your
would say
fingers through the
go
beer.
pound sand, but that, again,
There's some swamp
that's
water
fine.
out back that you might enjoy.
You know what? You want to try it? We got something called Swamp Thang in the tank. You want
Swamp
to try
Thang?
Yeah, it's a collaboration that we did. We basically Wisconsin Brewing Company and Lake Louie are now one.
Yes, that's
Lake
right.
Louie Tom Porter has been a very good friend of ours forever. And we decided to join forces, and we're having a gas. There's a wonderful little brewery in Madison called the Working Draft Brewing Company. And the brewmaster there is a gentleman named Clint Lohman. And Clint he worked with us for a year and a half or so before he went
off on his own.
Yeah, and we did a collaboration with basically the Lake Louie mentality and Clint. So we're doing this big IPA called Swamp Thing. And it's actually pretty good. If you guys can try some if you want. In a nod, I got to tell this story. Mike always talks about Berchtesgaden and drinking these great Dunkel beers, dark beer.
Yeah.
And Klaus has basically told Mike exactly how they do them in Germany. They don't use black malt. They're using this natural extract to give color because they feel roasted malt gives too much unpleasant harshness in the beer. So
Almost
Clint
like
would
burnt coffee or something would.
Exactly. And
Okay.
Clint would listen to Mike tell these stories, and Clint makes a beautiful dark beer now, and he calls it European Vacay. And he calls it that from after Mike's stories about being a bear.
And it's awesome.
It's really good.
He makes one of the best Dunkel
I think
beers
it's
I've ever had
nicest
in my
Dunkel
life.
I've had in the United
Sometimes
States.
I wonder if coming up with the names is actually the most fun part.
It's the
for
hardest thing at this point in time.
Yeah. Well, because probably every name in the world is
every
like.
brewery has 30 to 50 beers.
Yeah.
And there's 9,000 breweries. Do the arithmetic.
Yeah. Well, how the hell did you guys get the name? How did you guys? In 2013, how was the name Wisconsin Brewing Company not taken?
Actually, we are the fourth Wisconsin Brewing Company.
Are you really?
There had been one that some friends of mine started that was in the Menominee Valley in the late 80s, and they got flooded out twice. And they finally sold the brands to they finally had to give up. And it was
So
a
they
shame.
produced the original Swamp Thing then.
Kind of. You'd go in there, and after the first flood, they had a line on the wall, and I couldn't believe it. They had a 100-year flood twice. It was terrible, these poor guys. But there was also previous, I think in the 1800s, I can't remember it, but we are the fourth in the line of Wisconsin brewing companies. And let's face it, that's a hell of a responsibility. And look if MC here can pan around, we say Wisconsin Brewing Company, we mean it.
Yeah.
We're very proud of where we're from.
Oh, yeah, pretty much everything in here is from
Yeah,
Wisconsin.
and if you look at that, or there's a map on the wall, our brew house is German engineered by a company called Huttmann, which has been around for 150 years. Great company. But they're now owned by GEA, which is an international company of food processing equipment, primarily dairy. They have a beautiful shop in Hudson, Wisconsin. So we have a German-designed brew house that was made in Hudson, Wisconsin. All the tanks you see out here come from Sprague, which is a Wisconsin company that's been around forever. In fact, it was just recently purchased by Krones, which is a manufacturer of our canning equipment. Krones is a German company that's great. Their United States headquarters are an hour from here. So there's a Wisconsin thing. All of our pumps are Fristam, a German company, has a manufacturing facility not too far from where I live in Middleton. Beautiful place.
Is Wisconsin like the Germany of the U.S.?
There is.
There's areas of Wisconsin that are very German.
You ever heard of the Holy Land?
No. I did know there's a lot of German influence
If
in this
you
state, but I
go to
haven't heard of the Holy
Fond du Lac
Land.
and go up, if you go up Fond du Lac 151 and start driving up the east side of the lake from Fond du Lac till where 151 pieces off to the right to Chilton, there's an area to the right that's called the Holy Land. And there are these cities with names like St. Anne, Johnstown, all these biblical names.
Marytown.
Right. And what that happened was in the 1800s, some German villagers from Germany would come settle a certain area and love it and write all their home villagers, so to speak, you got to come in the New World. And so it was almost a transposition of a village from one locale or one country to another. Mm-hmm. And all these towns had these biblical names. They were small farming towns, and each had a big Catholic church, a huge spire, and you can see them all over the place.
Amazing. Well, I imagine they probably wanted to bring what they knew back home and have that here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So does good beer come out of the Holy Land?
Put it this way, I always knew there was a really good beer story there, all right? So here I got a couple friends of mine, a husband and wife team who they were working. Brees Malting on a Chilton is a great malting. So it's basically the maltings in this country, and I can explain malt if you want in a minute, that really supported the craft breweries, the microbreweries in the beginning. Well, the husband, Gary, is a pretty quiet guy until we get a few cocktails, and then he becomes Churchillian. And he's a wonderful guy. But we're talking one day, and he goes, yeah, I grew up in St. Anne. That's in the Holy Land. I'm going, stop. Tell me about this Holy Land. It's a fascinating concept, and I just want to know more about it. And he's telling me basically it's almost analogous to the Amish. These communities were very, very tight.
Yeah.
And very, very much supportive of each other. Like if you need a new garage, you just let the neighbors know, and they come over on a couple Saturday, Sundays, they knock down the old one and put up a new one. And then Gary lays this beautiful story on me. He goes, and every Sunday when it was nice out, my dad, all the guys in town, my dad would hang out in our backyard and drink beer and try to out-talk each other. And he goes, and when I was 8 years old, he started sending me to the bar to get a couple gallon jugs of beer. And I'm thinking of those screw-top gallon jugs with a finger hole.
Yeah.
And so I'm going, oh, so you're marching down the street with these jugs. He goes, no, man. He goes, these are open-mouth jars. And here's this 8-year-old kid marching down the street with these open jars of beer. And he goes, and I'm taking drinks. And he goes, not that I wanted beer, but I didn't want to piss off my dad by spilling beer all over myself. Beautiful. We did a lager for a while called Oh Reliable based on that story.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Awesome.
There's so many cool stories when it comes to beer.
I thought one that was pretty neat was the story behind Badger Club too, like how you got that name as from like one of the OG breweries.
Well, basically there were a number of Badger Clubs.
Okay.
And it's we wanted to make a very traditional German style lager, and basically what Badger Club is an amber lager, but based on the Märzen, the Oktoberfest style, just kind of Americanized, not of intense. But if you look, we were Badgers, Badger's a state animal, and it had a lot to do with the mining industry, being underground. And Wisconsin, including the 150 we have had today, has probably had close to 1,000 breweries since it became a territory.
Okay. Yeah.
And every small town back then had their brewery making their version of the American-style standard lager with cool names like Wisconsin Club and a lot of Badger Clubs. And so we are going through books of old beer labels looking at names, and there was a number of Badger Clubs, and we just felt it was such a great continuation of how breweries back then were trying to make beers that names represented what our state was all about. And so that's what Badger Club is.
Yeah.
And it's a very solid lager, Oktoberfest at heart, and it's really good. And in fact, it's important. It's the first beer we can on our line, and that's what we're going to be canning.
Very nice.
No way.
That's cool.
I like
That's
it.
cool. One other one that I heard about that I also wanted to ask, and this one, if you can speak to it, it'd be cool. there's some kind of crazy process I was hearing about with a Scotch ale, where it involves like some really hot stones or something like that.
Oh, depth charge.
Depth charge.
Depth charge.
There is a style of
that sounds awesome.
It is. There's a style of beer in Germany called Stein Beer, which means stone. And it harkens back to the days. Part of the process when we're making this wort is the boiling kettle. It has to be boiled. And one way to boil in the old days was to get these boulders. And to be a boulder, it has to be 10 inches in diameter, by the way, for the trivia buffs out there.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah.
Of granite. And they would put it in a basket and stick it in this fire overnight and get these boulders white hot. And then you add it to the wort to get the boil going. And we're going to boil for quite a few reasons.
The boulders just go
because
in.
they had it in wood pots, so you couldn't put the wood pot over the fire.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
So you'd have to find
And
a way
so
to boil it.
there are numerous reasons we boil, and we won't get into them here. But one of the byproducts of using these stones was the wort is a very sugar-rich liquid. And these stones being so hot, you get this intense caramelization of sugars when these rocks would hit the wort. And it really affected the flavor of the beer. So the year is 2000, 2001. 2001, actually, Tommy Porter started. And he had this little 3-barrel system, and I was editing for a magazine called Brew Your Own, and someone had written an article on these type of beers, and I'm going, that's cool. And I got together with the Great Dane, and we went out and conned Porter into making this beer. And so we, Mike was part of it, and we had a fire with these boulders in a metal basket, and we got pictures of all this stuff, and we carried it in, and I was worried about, because wort can, this kettle can overboil, it can be very dangerous. So I'm going, okay, we're adding these hot rocks, this could be a disaster. So Mike and Pat Keller, his neighbor who used to be the brewmaster at Great Dane Fitchburg, who's his partner in crime when they go to Germany, were the guys in charge of lowering these rocks into the fire, and I'm standing there with a hose, and we got escape routes, everyone's ready for disaster. And the rocks hit the wort, and it was perfect. We got a beautiful 30-minute boil, and then we augmented it with a steam boil, and the beer was great. It is absolutely, we did it basically as a Scotch ale. We just used one strain of malt, a strain from Britain called Maris Otter, which is quite good, and mildly hopped. We just really wanted to see what these rocks would do to the malt. You guys, it was so good. So, of course, we're going to do it again.
Does it make it like... does it impart a different flavor on it than you normally
Well,
would
what
get
happens
by?
is the sugars in the wort will actually caramelize on the stone.
Yeah.
And then as it cools down, they fall back off into the wort, and now they become a very, very fermentable sugar.
Right, and it also they almost add like a marshmallow character, but in a good way.
Right.
A burnt,
Really
a
intense
burnt
sugar.
marshmallow kind of taste.
Oh, okay.
The second year
My
we did it,
favorite.
we got the engineers involved and studied the rocks.
Oh, right.
So same thing, Mike and
Does
Pat
it
lower the
matter what
rocks.
rock
We
you
have our escape routes planned. These rocks, and I've got a picture of this. These rocks hit this wort, Mount Vesuvius. It exploded. I thought I killed you and Pat. They disappeared. And I'm spraying this stuff, and all I'm doing is spraying hot wort onto them if they start yelling at me. Keller was covered with spots of wort. Mike had a burn that big in his forearm that he was so proud of. The rocks, these new rocks, turned to sand, got into Tommy's system, took out every pump seal he had. He was ready to kill me, and the beer was awful.
Was it a different kind of rock? Same kind of rock?
Different rock, and we decided to hop up the formula, to American, and it destroyed it.
Supercharge it.
So, it's only funny till someone gets hurt.
Yeah.
Then it's hilarious.
Exactly.
And so we now do it out here on a much larger basis. We've got what we call a Stein kettle. That's 600 gallons, so we'll pump 20 barrels of wort. We'll start a brew and stop it and pump 20 barrels outside. And Mike Everson is our rock master. He's been out there barbecuing these rocks, and they literally get white hot. And Mike is on a forklift, and we do a lot of cheesy things. I mean, basically, we were using granite. The first granite we were going to use was going to be retired curling stones, the hardest granite known to man.
Hardest granite, yeah.
Okay.
You know what happens to the hardest granite when you barbecue it? It turns into the hardest sand known to man.
Really?
Yeah.
Amazing.
So we had to go back to boulders, but we do have the local curling club march along with Mike holding up their curling brooms. They're the guardians of the granite. And
Incredible.
but then, since it's called Depth Charge, about blowing things up,
Yes.
we hire a pyrotechnics company, and we have blown up dragons, swans. Mike and I did models of our evil Doppelbock
Wait,
gangers.
is this something that people can come see?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
When does this happen?
It's usually the first or second Saturday. This way, it's going to be the second Saturday in July.
Okay.
We have John
Always the Saturday after the 4th.
Oh,
yeah.
we got to come watch
Oh
this
man,
thing.
it's insane. I mean, This year, what we blew up was nothing, but we just had Mike made a floating fire pit out of stainless.
Okay.
Naturally.
I mean,
Right.
And it's awesome. And we'll use that as a platform. So we had all these explosions plus daytime fireworks in the background. And Mike also, if you go outside, built us a trebuchet. And the last Saturday in
that's right.
October,
Yeah, there is a
we
trebuchet
launched
out
pumpkins. And it's fun. There's something oddly satisfying about watching pumpkins arch through the air and hit the water. And we've got targets out there, and eventually we load up the fire pit with pallets and we torch that. And it's just, we've got this beer drinking's fun and doing.
People like weird stuff.
Yeah.
Especially when they're drinking beer.
Especially, yeah.
Fire, beer,
I'm
explosions.
kind of curious, too, because when I saw that trebuchet out, it's not small. Like, where did you learn to build a trebuchet?
This is Mike.
I guess
built
that's
in his frickin' driveway.
You just don't
Mike,
ask questions.
Mike, can I come help you get away?
Can
just
we
don't ask
explain
questions
Can
when
we
it's
explain a trebuchet?
It's essentially a gigantic, it's like a catapult
yeah.
made out of wood.
Basically, that's what it is.
Trebuchets were much more accurate, though, than catapults. Trebuchets came after catapults. Catapults were first.
Catapults were kind of like, they were just kind of like,
they were more wound with rope that were used as a spring, sort of to speak.
Yeah.
Okay.
And where a catapult or where a trebuchet is actually a pendulum with weight on it that you can calculate.
Oh, okay.
And so
Sounds a
when
little
you
more
release
scientific.
that, the amount of forces that it's throwing and the angle of the throw, you can do. And in the old days, they had it dialed in, man.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing. The engineering.
Dude, I used to play Age of Empires on the computer. I'd friggin' make a whole army of trebuchets and just go destroy everybody else's castle. I was such a nerd.
But,
I
dude,
played
we
on the
do
computer way
three-dimensional
too much.
trebuchets. And
yeah, this is real.
It's fun.
That is awesome.
We actually have a video. I have an old GoPro, and Mike mounted it to the camera. And we have video of what it's like to be launched in a trebuchet as being a pumpkin.
we mounted it right in the pumpkin, and then we launched him.
Incredible.
Yeah.
That's awesome. More things that you can, like the dealers and retailers must just love.
They love all these stories.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, but it's just, but again, anything, anytime, anywhere for no apparent reason at all. That's the philosophy.
Yeah.
And I don't know, we just have fun. But we're also very dedicated. It's all about the beer. And going back to that beer should be an adjunct of enjoyment of life, by God, we work our butts off. But we're going to go out in that beer garden and have a couple parties. We're going to have a couple parties.
Yeah.
We're going to do it right. And it's our responsibility to entertain the masses, and we do.
Hey, what do you guys think, and speaking of places that sell beer, because sometimes the places that sell beer are pretty sweet. What do you guys think is the coolest place that sells Wisconsin brewing beer that you've been to?
All of them.
All of them? Is there one that's like super stands out? Maybe it's like super mega old or like...
Everybody has their own unique atmosphere.
Yeah.
And it's there's a lot of really creative places all over Madison, all over the state.
Yeah.
But they're all unique.
They're
all unique in their own way.
Yeah, and again, it's I love them all. At heart, and Mike, Mike and my wife and I, we go to a lot of supper clubs because it's a traditional Wisconsin thing.
That's classic.
And so for us, I am very much a traditional person, and we love doing that. But yet, there's a lot of great new places out there that have approached the serving of beer in a very interesting way, paired with a lot of different foods. And that's what's great about beer: the flexibility. You're only limited how to brew it and enjoy it by your imagination.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. And what's the best beer I've ever had? Probably the one that's in my hand right now. People ask me what our favorite beer we make is here. I hate them all. All I do is worry about them. And I analyze them, and that's a mistake because beer.
You probably
was not,
can't drink it without thinking about it.
Oh yeah, and it's wrong because beer wasn't brewed to be analyzed; it was brewed to be enjoyed. And so, I'm my own worst enemy.
He is his own worst enemy.
And I mean,
Dang.
I will sit in here and one day have the glass of beer and say, "This is good." The next day, I want to take that same beer out of that glass and whip it against the wall because I'm not happy with it. It just. I'm neurotic paranoid.
There's nothing wrong with it. I'll let you know that. There's nothing wrong. He's just his own worst enemy.
Well, it's like even when you cook something, it's always better when somebody else cooks it, I feel. Except your burritos, Jim. You love your burritos.
I do love my burritos.
That sounds good.
It's a good burrito.
I've just been making the same burrito for 7 years, and I just really like it.
Hey, you're a burrito master.
Anyway, enough. This is a beer podcast.
But we're talking about
Burritos and beer are good together.
selling beer,
do.
cool places that sell beer, and you brought up the 3-tier system. And this was something that I only became this is something I didn't know until just even a couple of weeks ago, chatting with some guys, but it's an interesting system. Like, if you, I mean, you guys sell beer here, but like, it's almost like if you make the beer, you can't distribute the beer, and if you distribute the beer, you can't sell the beer. Like, how does that work?
There is a lot of interesting laws now. Like Tommy started out self-distributing, and up to, I think you can self-distribute in some state up to 10,000 barrels. Distributing is a lot of work, man. You've never gone into an account that thought of the beer delivery guy.
No.
And half barrels are 161 pounds each. And you will try, obviously you want to try, I've delivered enough beer to realize, man, it's you get 2 kegs on a cart going down an old rickety set of stairs and something goes wrong. It's loud. Things are flying. So it's a labor-intensive thing. You know, Tom self-distributed for many years. He can't anymore.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
it just, you literally beat yourself up. But it also, it's a kind of a big hangover from Prohibition. Mm-hmm. And let's face it, during Prohibition, were people going to stop drinking? Nah.
No.
One of the biggest result from Prohibition was it took a lot of Bush League criminals and made organized crime a power in this country, because there was this demand for huge amounts of this product that was very profitable and wasn't legal to sell, but people, that actually made it more attractive. So
Right.
who's in charge of the industry then? Criminals. And so the basis of the 3-tier system became Prohibition, where after Prohibition, you had these organized crime basically in charge of the alcohol, and it was very lucrative, so they're going to hold on to it. And it became a 3-tier system also to protect smaller companies, because you get the very, very large companies that could buy up accounts and buy all these bars in that, and they could only sell their beer. It was called a tied house.
Oh.
And so...
okay.
Almost
so-
kind of like monopoly, like having a
It
monopoly.
was, exactly. And so one of the reasons for a producer, wholesaler, retailer was to try to cut the brewers out of the business of selling beer so the large ones couldn't just stomp on the small ones.
Oh, okay.
And so, and distribution, our industry is all about distribution. You know,
Yeah.
it's so hard. And the distribution, ironically, lately has gone the way of the breweries did. When we were down to 61 breweries, they've consolidated. It's like Wisconsin distributing River City.
Yep. Yeah, I was a
forces
part
couple
of the
years ago. River City gang.
I was a River City guy because I started in beer almost 5 years ago with River City, and I was in the west side of Madison, and then consolidation happened, and now Wisconsin distributors.
Right.
But yeah,
And so here you have the distributors these days, where it's getting difficulties. You have a limited number of distributors, and all of a sudden you've got all these breweries coming up, and they all are in your face that you're selling our beer and we expect this. And these guys are just being inundated.
Yeah.
There's so many brands and limited shelf space and what's new and blah, blah, blah. So,
Yeah.
you know, right now their challenge is to try to pick through the chaff and keep, you know, because basically...
and it evolves.
and one of
It's
the problems
evolving.
with this what's new is a new beer will come to the market, and it's hotter than a $7 pistol for a month. And then people move on to something
And then
else.
everybody forgets about it, yeah.
But you bought all this beer, and let's get back to beer being fragile. It'll sit on the shelf beyond its shelf life, and someone might finally pick it up, and it's bad. And first impressions are the ones you're going to remember, and people tend to
huge.
stress negatives more than positive. So ironically, you know, you can be a victim of the success of the industry with all the new stuff by brands. You've got to produce. It's a volume business. You got to produce enough to justify the business, but it might not be one that sells a lot. And it was hot for a while, now it's not. And all of a sudden it's getting old, and you guys have to have a lot of money tied up in inventory that has to be destroyed.
Yeah.
So again, it's just the challenges of our industry right now.
And I've
how it's
noticed,
evolving.
like, personally drinking, I'm all about what's new, what's hot. And then, like, a week ago, I sat down, I'm like, I just need a beer. You know what I mean?
good
Just
beer.
a good, hearty, like, Badger Club. I'm just drinking all these new, innovative stuff. And then you get to that point where it's like, you just need to take a step back and know, like, where beer started.
Yeah.
And drink that solid Badger Club, that amber, that solid lager. It's just like,
Yeah,
you get to that point.
Yeah.
Again, it's a term that a lot of people kind of say, well, it means it's a boring beer. I know it doesn't. That's drinkability.
Yeah.
And it's about balance. What drinkability means is, okay, we pop this Badger Club or this Warp Speed, and we pour a glass, and we take a sip, and whoa, don't you put me down. You want another drink. It should be friendly. It should have a nice personality and soul, but as it finishes, it's a lingering finish that makes you go, that was good.
Yeah.
I want another.
'Cause it
and
is
some
always-
beers can do that initially, but if they're way whacked out of balance with bittering or too much intense specialty malt or whatever funky ingredient, after time, builds up unpleasantly on the palate.
It is such a pain when you go to a party or whatever and you open up the cooler and you got all these weird things that are super off the wall. And I'm thinking to myself, well, now what I have to do is I crack it open. Whoever got the beer is going to come over and be asking me what I think about it and how it hits my palate and all this other stuff. And I'm like, all I want to do is grab a beer and hang out. I didn't come over here to be Napoleon Dynamite. This one tastes like the beer got into the onion patch. Like.
Good way to put it, by the way. Seriously. Yeah.
So, you guys have also gotten into one thing I wanted to like almost divert for a second is some of these seltzers, right? Is that like a hard seltzer?
Actually,
that's like the hot new thing.
Isn't.
What's new?
We'll discuss
right.
seltzers in a second. What we're making is a Radler. And it's kind of a modern version of a Radler. What Radlers are is let's just all stare at Mike.
What is that magical sound?
Talking about Radler.
Is that the canning alarm?
Yeah.
Does that mean you got to go canning?
What a Radler is this is something that evolved in Germany, I believe, post-World War II, all right?
Thank you, sir.
And the story behind it was there was a guy who had a guest house on a very popular biking trail. And there was going to be this huge biking event, and they were going to be stopping at his place. So it's a score for him, okay? Mm-hmm. He screwed up. He didn't order enough beer.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden he's besieged with all these thirst-crazed cyclists, and they're beer, and he's running out.
Oh, they can
what
be
is he
quite
going to do?
dangerous.
And as legend goes, he had a bunch of lemon soda that was a cellar dog he couldn't get rid of. He started mixing it 50-50 with the beer, and everyone dug it.
Oh, so it's like...
It's half soda, half beer. Oh. And Radler means cyclist. It's a lower ABV, very refreshing drink that when you're outside sweating and riding bikes or running around might be better than a big Doppelbock.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, so that became Radler. And ours is a modernized version is that we're making it with a gluten-free beer and a natural fruit soda.
Oh, cool.
But seltzer is a...
Should we crack it? Is it cold enough?
So there's a beer element to like you said, like versus a seltzer.
Yeah. Well, what? Okay.
It's 10 a.m.
It's
in
10
Wisconsin.
a.m.
We're already
We
late.
should crack one,
Here's
right?
what seltzers are, and
I'm not gonna
technically
fight
they're
you
a
on
beer,
it.
but the law has changed. And when you make a seltzer, to be a beer, you got to have some malted barley in it. Okay.
Yeah.
You make a base product that is 99% sugar and maybe 1% malt extract, hardly any. Okay. It also has to have hops in it, but no, you don't want a hop character in terms of bittering or flavor in a seltzer. So what are you going to do? You're going to go to a hop company, and they have they make hop extracts where all the essentials things that brewers are concerned with in the hops are extracted and put into a really thick syrup form for those who want to use that type of extract. And then you have all this vegetable chaff that they used to throw away. Now they pelletize it and sell it as spent hops. You add it to the boil, so you're fulfilling a part of the law where it's got to be hopped, even though it's not.
Oh, it's nothing.
Right. And then you're using a champagne or something, a yeast that's very alcohol tolerant, and making a beer that tastes like, anywhere from bad fingernail polish to very cheap Chardonnay at about a 16% ABV. What do? If you have the technology, you run it through membrane filtration. If not, you circulate it through carbon filter and take all the color and flavor out of it and have what's beer vodka, which is basically a clear, flavorless liquid of about 15% ABV.
Yeah.
Then you dilute it with carbonated water and the flavor goodness, and you have seltzer. And it's a lot lower in carbohydrates than that and this and that, sugars and all this stuff. It's, whatever trips your trigger, but White Claw, which didn't exist 3 years ago, outsold Budweiser in July this year. It's
incredible. It is everywhere.
And
It's a phenomenon.
yeah, and it's not what I drink, but a lot of people do. And it's just like a lot of this day and age is, drink without consequences, meaning no sugar. No, it's just basically
it's a healthy generation coming up.
Well, you got commercials now where it's like people are doing CrossFit, and the next minute they go and they drink a beer, and it's like that. Wait, I'm buying beer because I do CrossFit. Wait, what?
Yeah, and that's again whatever your lifestyle is, but it's strange. I mean, for me, it's very strange.
Yeah.
But they become incredibly popular.
Yeah.
And it's just, again, now the market's going to get very crowded. So Radler is not a seltzer. It's a version of a traditional product, but we've done it gluten-free and in such a way with the beers so we can use natural fruit juice and some sugar and still be in low, about 110, 120 calorie range.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, this day and age, when I go out and sell these type of things, you have customers coming up. I don't know if I'm selling beer or seltzer or if I'm discussing organic chemistry. I mean, he goes, well, what about what sugars and what sugar? And what? Stop. You want a drink or not? You know?
That's the question. Let's get down to brass
This is
tacks.
getting too complicated.
Funny story. Klaus was here a couple of years ago because he loves to hunt.
Yeah.
And so we took him deer hunting up to Carl's place.
From
in
Germany, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
So
you
he's
all
here to hunt, and we're sitting around the campfire, and that's about the time that we were coming out with the Rattlers. And so we're coming out with the Rattlers, and we're sitting around the fire, and we're just kind of talking and drinking some beers, and we're talking about this Rattler that we're going to do, which is
Try
Stiegel
one of
was
these
kind
here.
of the bullseye.
Stiegel's the quintessential German grapefruit rattler.
Red
and-
grapefruit.
Stiegel was the essential rattler that we were kind of the target was,
Yeah.
the bullseye. And we're sitting around the fire, and Klaus goes, I invented it.
Wait, what?
I invented Stiegel Rattler.
Yeah, he had been the genesis behind this product that became.
You guys didn't even realize prior to that?
No. And Mike also has the greatest video of Klaus's first experience with a light beer.
Holy crap.
his
Wait, I
reaction
just
to
tried
it.
this stuff.
It's very pleasant, isn't it? It's very
It
good.
is.
It's low ABV, only about
The
3.
grapefruit is a great breakfast beer.
Great breakfast. I agree.
Oh, goodness.
Which is totally, it's not even 10 a.m. now. And I'm
it's-
enjoying a good breakfast beer.
Oh, it's not only a good
Like we
breakfast
said-
beer, Jim. This is my breakfast this morning.
Me too.
Perfect.
That's
See?
it is weirdly like drinking a beer, but like,
There's some beeriness to it, but it's
Yeah.
also fruit soda. It's only about 3.5 ABV.
yeah.
So it's gentle. It's
It
really,
is.
it's very nice, again, for me, very nice sunny day afternoon drink.
Yeah.
Oh,
and it,
man.
Because
gosh,
you're
what
not
am I
going to get
trying
all ripped up, and it's pleasant as hell.
I drink it and I don't immediately have to like uncomfortably burp. You know what I mean? Which is nice.
I discovered it as a breakfast beer. We went to EAA a few months ago, and I took some Rattler along. I take some beer along just so, because we'll run into people in the camp, and they'll go, who are you guys? What are you doing? And here, try one of these, try one of these. Well, we were sitting around the fire in the morning, getting the fire going, getting ready to cook breakfast, and Pat said, I'm kind of thirsty. I said, well, let's have a Rattler.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I haven't had one of these before. I can't believe how good this is.
You're a big White Claw fan, Mark. What do you think?
This
This
is
has
better.
I
more
prefer
flavor.
this over because
This is amazing.
I prefer this much. Mark, I'm sorry.
No,
I never was on the
agree.
White Claw bandwagon. Anyway,
So many of the
Well, you know
newer-
why I like 'em?
So
It's
many
for
of the
the
flavored
same-
drinks they taste like laboratories. It's
Yeah,
artificial.
They do. Yeah.
No, this tastes like refreshing grapefruit juice.
You
it
guys
is.
are behind us. They're firing up the can. Like, Mike, do you got to get going to
man.
that? You got to
I do,
oversee
I
that?
do.
All right. That's
Actually,
fair.
and plus, this is a big moment.
This is a huge moment
Well,
in
you guys gotta
Wisconsin
come out
brewing
and be
part
company
of it.
history. We'll check
And
it
you
out
have
for
to
sure.
understand something. This is how willing we are always to open our kimono, so to speak. This is a startup. You know what startups are? Fraught with minefields and disasters. So who knows what you might see?
Hey.
But you're more willing to come hang out and try a couple right off the line.
Can't wait. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us on the
thanks
podcast.
for having us.
Oh, no,
It's
it's a
been
lot of fun.
amazing. My mind's blown. We got to go watch some beer go into cans for the first time ever. This is huge. So everybody, check
And
out
thanks
Wisconsin
for what
Brewing.
you guys do with your company. It's
Oh.
an awesome organization.
Thank you. It's our pleasure. If
Appreciate
you
it.
are ever in South Central Wisconsin, come to Verona. Come to the Wisconsin Brewing Company. There's a sweet pond out here. Apparently, you can go kayaking in it or whatever you want. That's what they were telling us. There's an awesome
there's a couple
patio,
guys who caught 11-inch
concerts.
bluegills out of that thing.
I was going to ask about your
Ice
ordinances here as far as discharging firearms because there were a lot of geese on that pond earlier.
Yeah.
You know, I tell you what, we had
Silencer.
won't
a couple
tell
years
anybody.
ago when we shot the pumpkin, there were a bunch. First time we shot the Trebuchet, there was a bunch in the target area. And, well, fine, they're in a way to shoot the thing. And it landed close to them, and they realized immediately they didn't want to be there. So they swam out of range and stayed. But they figured it out after the first shot that, I don't know what those creatures are doing, but we want no part of it. But if we're here, we're okay.
Educating geese.
It was kind of disappointing.
Well, perfect. Well, thanks again, you guys.
Thanks,
Let's go,
guys.
Let's
All
go
right.
watch this
All right.
process unfold. All
Couldn't
right.
come on a better day. That's
Bye.
awesome.
All right, guys, thanks.
Thank you.
All right, that'll wrap it up for this episode of the Vortex Nation podcast. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Hit that subscribe button so you can always stay up to date on the latest happenings over here at the Vortex Nation podcast. You can also follow us on Instagram at Vortex Nation Podcast. Again, everybody, thanks, and happy hunting and shooting. We appreciate it. Have a good one.